there's a tendency or a belief, or maybe it's like what we're hoping for is to somehow quiet the mind or get control over the mind, or teach our mind how to be nice to ourselves, less critical, maybe nicer to the world, to the people around us. Anybody after that? Right? So there are practices and disciplines and traditions that are about mind training, or training the mind. There's no doubt that you can do that. But that isn't really what is at the heart of what I think we want. I think what we really want is to know peace. What we really want is to know love. What we really want is to feel at home in our life, moment to moment. And so the desire to control the mind, or train the mind, or get the mind to be nicer, is really to generate those things. I mean, I don't want to put words in what you want. Okay, you have to investigate it and see, like, what do you really want? Why would you want to control your mind? Why would you want your mind to be quiet? It's because you want peace. But this whole learning how to create the mind that you want, or that your mind wants to want. Like our minds want to be different. The mind wants to be different. So it has these thoughts. I want to be different. I'm going to change myself. So then the mind thinking, it's really a thinking process, tries to figure out how to change its own process, pulling itself up by its own bootstraps. And this is hard. I mean, this is really difficult. It's not easy. Which is why people get addicted to drugs and alcohol and experiences and relationships and situations and activities that they think will quiet the mind to a certain extent, or dull it, or make it feel satisfied. But all of this is under the mistaken identity of believing that that's who we are. It's like, I have these weird, like, short, stubby hands, It's just the hands I have, right? Like, I'm not going to devote my whole life to trying to have long, slender hands. It's like, that makes no sense, right? I'm going to go to, like, some plastic surgeon and give me longer hands, longer fingers. I don't like the short, stubby ones. And while you're at it, I'm not really into the triple E 7.5 foot either. So, like, why? But because I know that I'm not my hands and I'm not my feet, and I learned how to function with them. They're fine. I don't need to, like, go through a whole lot of effort to try to change. But I know that that's not who I am. I know I'm not my hands, and I know I'm not my feet. I see them out there, and they do stuff. They're useful. I'm very happy and grateful that I have them. But they're not me. But because our mind, our thinking process, uses the first person singular all the time, it's brainwashed us, awareness, into believing that that's who I am. And society has gone along with this, and teachers have gone along with this, and our parents and everybody we know pretty much is under this same illusion or delusion that we are our thoughts. Very famous French philosopher Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." Anybody ever heard of Descartes? He's way more famous than anybody in this room. And he was dead wrong. It's not, "I think, therefore I am."
I've heard it's "I am, therefore I think."
Well, either way, there's not "I am aware," and then period. And then in that awareness, or the "I am," thoughts may occur and they may not occur. Sensations may occur and they may not occur. Sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touch may occur and they may not occur. And who we are is absolutely independent of any of that. And this just takes careful observation, which is what many forms of meditation, rather than trying to control or train the mind, we're trying to observe carefully, either in the case of Direct Path, awareness, how we know the mind. And if I know my mind, then I am not my mind, because I'm the knower of it, not it. But even with insight meditation, even though you're not going directly to that, you're observing the arising and passing of thought and sensation and sound and all other sensory experience. You're observing it carefully, moment to moment. And in that, you have the insight over and over. I'm not that, because I'm observing it. You can see it arise and pass and arise and pass. And if you can see something arise and pass, you're not it. Because when it passes, you're not disappeared. If you watch a thought disappear and then there's space before the next one arises, you know you're not the thought, because you didn't disappear. You didn't just evaporate into nothing. You sat there until the next thought arose, which might be, "Oh, there's another thought." You're creating an observer. That's not thought. But then this isn't a mind training process. It's a process of disentangling ourselves from believing that the thought process or the mind is who we are. And it takes time, because our thinking process keeps on saying "I." It keeps on grabbing the microphone, right? It has this big PA system with a mic, and the PA is turned up really loud. And it's in our head telling us over and over and over, "I'm this, I'm that, I want, I need, I don't like, I like." And all of that is believable because we're used to it. It's a habit. So we have to see through it more than once. First, we see through it enough where intellectually we know, "I'm not my thoughts." In other words, we can have the thought, "I'm not my thoughts," and believe it. But then we have to go through the experience of that over and over and over until we stop believing it. Does that make sense? It's not enough to have a philosophical understanding where you can, let's say, disprove I think, therefore I am. That is not enough. We have to have that experience over and over and over again. But it's not some cosmic, enlightened, inaccessible experience. It's simply the experience of watching a thought arise and watching it pass and seeing the gap between that thought and the next thought. And if you notice the gap, if you notice that there is a gap, in the same way that there's a period and a pause before my next sentence, right? There's a gap there. Well, I didn't disappear. You didn't disappear. You still were aware. I'm still aware. There just wasn't any sound or any thought or any word. So what we have to do is we have to start paying attention to the space that's not the words. Because we basically ignore that. It's like reading. Like when you read, you're paying attention to the words on the page. You're not looking at the white lines between the words and the sentences. Right? Nobody does that. You just look at the words. That's how our minds are trained. And it's the same with our own thinking. We forget to look at that thought is arising in this vast field of awareness. Because we're just paying attention to the content of the words in the thought. So it's retraining ourselves, not even retraining, but remembering, like that we are that awareness. We're not trying to change the content of our thought. That's a whole nother thing. There are practices where we can investigate it. But here we're not even trying to investigate it per se. We're trying to understand not what it's saying, but what it is and what it isn't. So that the we that I'm talking to is you awareness, not you thought. And it's just remembering that. Nothing needs to change. So this is like, it's very relaxed. This is a relaxation in meditation. It's not that active. We're just trying to sink down and just relax. And then, you just know, okay, whatever. The same way that you might notice that you're breathing or there's sound in the room. We all heard the heater, right? The sound of the air. It's somewhat white noise and somewhat maybe a little denser than white noise. But nobody thought they were that sound, right? It was just there. In insight meditation, they talk about the progress of insight. Has anybody ever heard that expression? And I don't know if it's official or not, but I've always said, half humorously, that does anybody know what, like, the first insight that most people have? I can't stop thinking. Like as soon as you start meditating, that's usually the first insight. I can't stop thinking. My mind is completely out of control and sort of crazy. Because for most people, most of the time, they're not even aware that that's the case. They just think that that's just the way it is. Like they've never taken any kind of a observer perspective on their thought process to realize that their thought process is like an 8-lane freeway that you're trying to cross that's full of traffic going 90 miles an hour. And you're the poor person who's like trying to get across that freeway without a bridge. Like you can't do it. You can't stop that thought process. I remember when I was like in college and I was trying to get a handle on like me, like myself, like who I am and what's going on. And I would like, so I tried to like journal like what was happening for me. And it was just like this, it was like an 8-lane freeway. Like I couldn't write it down fast enough because it was so, and then I would go back and look at it and it was just like, yuck. Like it was just a lot of crap. None of it really made sense and none of it was particularly deep or useful or insightful. It was just a lot of stuff. And it was overwhelming. And that's the first level of understanding our mind is it's big and it's fast and it's a lot. And most of it isn't true and most of it's repetitive and most of it isn't useful. So that's the second insight. More bad news. Right? Most of it isn't true. It isn't useful. And it's repetitive. But then you start having the insight of, but it's not who I am, it's not me. It's just this happening. So it becomes less and less of a problem.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I guess I'm having trouble understanding the difference between my awareness and like having a thought saying, "Oh, I'm not having any thoughts right now."
Well,
you know, like a meditation, I'll have like a couple seconds where it's like, I'm not having any thoughts. This is amazing.
Right, but then you say it to yourself.
Well, exactly, and so.
And then it's not true anymore.
Right, and so it's hard to it's hard for me to grasp when it's my awareness that's aware, or it's my mind, like having a conversation with itself.
Well, they're very different, but we have to tease out that difference because only awareness is aware. The mind in and of itself is not aware. It is an object of awareness. We are aware of thinking. Thinking is not aware of itself. Thoughts are not self-aware. If you observe thoughts, you awareness, then that's what's aware. And then you're aware of thoughts in the same way that you're aware of this thing I'm holding in my hand, right? There's no question that you're not this thing. I mean, in pure non-duality, yes. But what we're doing is we're talking about the first, interestingly and importantly, the first step in non-duality or non-dual awareness is separating from our experience and finding awareness. And then after that, naturally, we realize that what we're aware of is, everything is just made of that same awareness. That's the non-duality part. But to realize that, we have to first separate and realize that we are not our minds. We are not our thoughts. That awareness is its own thing, even though it's not really a thing.
Yeah, I guess what I struggle with is that line doesn't feel very well defined.
Can you touch it for a half a second sometimes?
Yes.
Okay, that half a second proves in your experience that awareness is separate from thinking. But then thinking comes back in relatively quickly and says, oh, I wasn't thinking. And disproves what you just experienced by taking the thought that I just said that's sort of comical.
Yeah, it just feels like it kind of sometimes just kind of flows back. It's not real defined.
No, because that's what I want to have you recognize in your own experience, that those very quick glimpses are actually very important, that they're true, that's the truth in your experience, that glimpse. And valuing it and noticing it and paying attention to it will increase the frequency and duration, because that awareness is actually there all the time. It doesn't go away. That glimpse isn't like, oh, it wasn't there and then I created it. It's more that we're hypnotized by the flow of thought to believing that that's who we are. And in that, we miss that we're not the thought, we're the awareness. So any glimpse of that is very important, even though it's brief. And yeah, the mind does that. The mind will take credit for it. Oh, I wasn't thinking. How about that? It's hilarious. I mean, just laugh at it because it's funny. You know, this goes back to the analogy of the movie and the screen. And that analogy, I think, works really well here. That if you picture a self-aware white movie screen, and it's self-aware, and then you project a movie onto it. So the screen is awareness. There's no content. It's a pure white self-aware screen that basically isn't made of anything and doesn't even exist as a thing. But for the sake of the metaphor, we'll call it it's a movie screen. It's a finite object, even though it's not finite. And so the movie is projected onto it, and we're watching the movie. And how many of us watching, whether it's a TV screen or a video screen, how many of us are aware of the screen behind the movie? Right? We don't, you would probably say, well, I can't see it because the movie's on it. Right? But if there's no screen, there's no movie. Right? The only substance that allows that movie to exist is the screen. The light has to stop somewhere, otherwise it just goes infinitely into space, and there's no movie. So we forget that we are that awareness because the movie is so interesting, and the movie seems to contain everything that we want. So we're trying to figure out how to get the movie to become more peaceful and more satisfying and more loving. But we're not in charge. We didn't write the script. We're not really directing it. And all this plot and stuff keeps happening, and it doesn't make us happy, and it doesn't make us peaceful. I mean, some of it does, but not all of it. But the screen is fine. Who we are, being, awareness, Buddha nature, is love. It's absolute peace. It doesn't need anything from the movie. When it reflects itself into life, it comes from that. So life is then generated from peace and love without any effort of changing the movie. When I'll say it outside of the metaphor, because the metaphor isn't designed for that part of it that well. But when we connect more and more to who we are, which is that awareness or being aware or our being, or in Buddhist terms, Buddha nature. There are many words for it. We're basically connecting to peace and love. Like that's our nature. That's the nature of awareness. So that expresses itself in everything that we do once we connect to it. I mean, we still have our habits. That all needs to be worked on, but it gets worked on from the connection from what's inside, not from some part of our mind demanding that we reach some kind of external metric or comparison. It's not coming from, I'm not good enough and therefore I need to. It's just coming from, oh, that's not coherent with what I know myself to be, so I won't say that or do that. So it's a process, but it's not from the outside. It's not from comparison. But it's easy to devalue those glimpses. Don't devalue the glimpses, however long, however infrequent. When we value them, when we realize what they are, then what we notice is that then there's more of them and they last longer. Don't try to create them using your mind. You can use pointers, like saying I am to yourself once during a meditation is a pointer. Or saying, if something's bothering you, like, who's bothered? Who's pained? Who's irritated? Who's angry? Once to yourself. And see if you can find, not in your mind, but in your experience, who that is. And it just releases, like it's like, oh, there's nobody. There's just bothering. There's the verb of being bothered, but there's nobody actually there who is bothered. It's not that you're trying to be unbothered, but you realize that bothering, like, there's nobody there to be bothered.
Here's that part confuses me because there still is the I and the I am.
Right, but that's just awareness. It's not bothered. It's just aware. The screen is not bothered by the most violent slasher movie or the death of Romeo and Juliet at the end of that film. The screen is utterly unbothered by that. It's utterly unaffected by their passionate romance. The screen. It's not bothered by the most insipidly dumb commercial at the beginning of the movie or in the middle.
I guess it still feels like there's someone there to be bothered.
Well, that's true. It feels like that's true.
Yeah.
But that's what we need to investigate. That's what we need to question in your own experience. Like, I know that it feels like that, but if you ask yourself, who is that? And can you find them in your own experience? Can you actually find an entity in your own experience? Or is it just a thought process that you're aware of? Like when you really look beyond the level of thought, is there somebody there who's bothered? Not the voice that says, oh, I am. Right? That's just a thought. That's just thinking. You know, the thought's like demanding, like, wait a minute, I'm bothered. But is there somebody, or is it just a thought? Being identified with our thinking process is a habit that, you know, you were taught that. We were all taught that from birth, with language, by everybody.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It falls on that one. So what if it's happening in the body and not in the mind? In other words, you feel something, discomfort, your heart is aching.
It's exactly the same.
It's the same as thought.
Yes.
Because it's in the body. Okay.
Yeah. I'm talking about thinking, but just as thinking is a phenomena that we are aware of, it's an element of experience. So is emotional body sensations or images, thinking in pictures, or any other experience. Like one of the things with insight meditation, I remember when my teacher Shinzen said this years ago, like when I first started sitting with him. He said, you know, and it was very structured, disciplined meditation, and he divided all of our sensory experience up into 6 categories, which some of you know: see in, hear and feel in, see out, hear out, feel out. And that's pretty much all of our sensory experience, except if you directly experience something like emptiness but that's the basic normal categories of experience. So see out is seeing the room, hear out is hearing my voice, feel out is feeling physical body sensations. See in is mental imagery, thinking in pictures. Hear in is thinking in words. And feel in is emotional body sensations. And what we normally call emotions, like I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel love, I feel happy, is a combination of see in, hear in, and feel in. So we have thoughts, images, and body sensations that come together and create what we call an emotion. And you know what he said was, you meditate on each of these things over and over and over until they all have equal weight and none of them are who you are. And that kind of blew me away. You know, it's like, you know, that's a destructive process. It's a process of that's not. We're not trying to get something. We're trying to undo something or let go of something or not do something. But it was the de-weighting of emotional or thinking, the de-weighting of it that, well, that's not who I am. It's just something that's happening. So yeah, any experience. So yeah, thanks for bringing that in. I've been talking about thinking because typically it's important that our minds, our thinking process gets behind this inquiry. The mind, because the mind believes that that's who we are, and even the emotional experiences that you're talking about are driven by thought that's maybe unconscious or subconscious. They're tied in together. They're not separate. There's beliefs that drive it. There's memories that drive it. There's conditioning that drives it. So it's important for us to intellectually, conceptually understand that that's not who we are, so that we can investigate and find out in our own experience what the truth is. So it's not enough to understand it conceptually, but for most people it's important to understand it conceptually. Why? And it kind of like, the mind gets interested. Like the mind becomes, it's not an obstacle in this inquiry. The mind can actually be an ally, because the mind tries to sort it out and it can't. The mind will never know awareness. But in trying to understand awareness, or trying to understand the mind can't. But in trying to and failing, it's incredibly valuable. Because the mind can't understand it, it throws us back on what's actually true, which is, oh, I am awareness, and the mind is just something that's arising in awareness. And the mind can't really understand that experientially.
That's kind of tricky, because who is understanding that you are awareness if it's not your mind?
It's the direct experience of that. It's not an intellectual, conceptual understanding. It's just being aware.
It's just an experience.
It isn't even really an experience. It's because it has no content. It's just awareness.
So what is it?
It's just awareness.
It's just
But you've all had that happen. So it's not out here. This isn't like, you've all had that many, 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 many times. Like any time that you're struck by beauty or awe, and there's just that moment of, and before the mind says, oh, how beautiful, and ruins it. But in that moment, whether it's nature or art or somebody you love, and it's just like that moment when you really see and feel, and there's just like, there's nobody there, it just is. Like everybody, you can relate to that, right? This is like normal human experience, but we don't realize the implication of it. That what's really happening there in that moment is, that's just going back to being. It's pure awareness. It's pure recognition. Or the moment between thoughts, or
sometimes it feels like there's a subtle veil in front of this awareness. And let me explain one of my meditation practices. So I was thinking that I'm getting glimpses of awareness, and what I thought was awareness was getting more and more expansive. However, at a certain point, I had this realization that it was a veil of anxiety. It was like permeating and almost feeling like this spacious awareness, but there was this And then that dropped, but it was very subtle experientially.
Well, you were aware of anxiety.
But it was so subtle, it almost wasn't there.
That's okay. But that doesn't, it doesn't mean that you weren't in some way aware, or aware of being aware. But in that, you were also aware of anxiety, which is fine.
But I could have mistaken that for awareness, really. It was so subtle.
But then you didn't. I mean, that's one of the interesting things, is that the more that we do this, the more that things that are in the quote unconscious or subconscious become conscious. So things come up that are always there, or often there, that we're not aware of, and then we become aware of them. They come into consciousness, and all that needs to happen is just being aware of them. We don't need to work on them, change them, understand why they're there, have a conversation with them. It's just, oh, that. Not always. I mean, sometimes there's work to be done. But when things just come into, oh, I didn't realize, and now I do, that's not a problem. That's just something that was being suppressed or is now being allowed.
Yeah, I guess what I'm also saying that other times anxiety was very, like, I could track it with thoughts and emotional body sensations and the whole jam. And this time it was so very
More subtle. Right. Yeah. And maybe underneath that there's another layer that's even more subtle. And that's cool. That's fine. It's totally fine. I mean, the ultimate truth about having a body that's going to die is a certain degree of vulnerability and fear. That, you could call it anxiety, you could call it whatever word you want, but the body is vulnerable. The body is afraid. Its most primitive, basic instinct is fight, flight, or freeze, I guess, right? They added freeze to the list. But, sorry?
They added a fourth, fawn.
And fawn?
Trying to placate,
Right. But they're all fear-based. Mm-hmm. They're all basically different behaviors that are fear-based. And that, that's smart if you're trying to design a nervous system that's going to survive the rigors of life in a body, that it's got to be afraid. It's got to learn that, if you do that, it's bad. If you put your hand on a stove, don't do that. There's pain and there's fear. But that's the body. But we are not the body. We're awareness. And so in that investigation, we start to allow the body to be what it is and do what it is, and not identify with it. That's not who we are. We're not those emotions. It's not about repressing them or denying them. But the more that we realize awareness, we become more sensitive, not less. It's not like emotions go away. We can get more and more attuned to more and more subtle feeling. But they're not a problem.
I feel like it's kind of similar to what Tunde was saying. Like sometimes there will be thoughts that are like really slippery. Like I don't even feel like they're thoughts of words. It's just like words. It's just like a thought that you could almost miss. So I don't really feel like I'm like aware of it necessarily.
Yeah.
But I think I'm just like I think I'm doing nothing. But then there's also these like slippery little thoughts that are like happening.
Does anybody else relate to what Catherine's? Okay, so this is like the subconscious or unconscious source of thoughts doesn't stop thinking totally just because it's stopped sending thoughts up into consciousness. So it's like it's still sort of generating what would be like pre-thoughts. So you're aware of that process, like that there's a certain hum of...
Like just barely.
Yeah, but you can't put words to it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like half formed or half baked or 10% formed, 10% baked, 5%, whatever it is. They get, you can almost follow it while you're meditating or even falling asleep. And you can follow it with imagery too. Like it just sort of disconnects and it becomes incoherent. And that's very natural. I mean, noticing that that's just part of the process of things calming down. And you're just aware of that. This is like another piece of evidence that you are not your thoughts, because you're still there watching thoughts that aren't even real thoughts. They're just sort of like, it's like if somebody took the Scrabble things and threw them randomly on the floor. They're not words they're not thoughts, they're just letters. They don't mean anything.
I'm hearing that I am not my thoughts, but what I keep thinking is that you keep saying, Johann, that the thought goes away, that it doesn't mean that I disappear, right? I keep thinking, well, the mind is still there. The mind is not my thought either. The mind is producing these things, and it's my mind, part of who I am. You mentioned the unconscious burbling, and then that rising up to consciousness. That seems to be also part of me, my mind.
Yeah. But it's part of you in the same way that your hand is part of you. It's not really part of you. It's something that, is that you're aware of.
The only reason it's there is because I'm aware of it.
Yep.
That's why you said everything is made of awareness.
Ultimately, yes.
It's tough.
Well, that one's harder to grasp. That one, because that gets into a philosophical level because the first step in this is to realize that awareness is who I am. So until that is clear, it's very difficult to then realize that everything is awareness. And it doesn't quite make sense. I mean, there are people that, like Rupert, can talk about this stuff and logically convince you in a much more eloquent way than I can that everything is awareness or everything is consciousness. And I don't think that that philosophical understanding is the most important thing right now. I think the most important thing right now is to realize that you are awareness. And that's the pulling back. And from that, realizing that everything is that same awareness is a natural step, whether you believe it philosophically or not. Because once you realize you're that awareness, you can't find any limit to it. You can't find any end to it. And if my awareness is infinite and yours is infinite and they're separate, then they're not infinite. So therefore, either there is a limit to it and there's some stuff that divides it, or we're both the same awareness. And nobody can find that stuff. So there, I tried to convince you of it without even trying to. But the experience of you being that infinite awareness is what matters. Once you do that, or once you know that, then the implications of it just happen. And we call, the word that we have for that is love. If I can't find anything between you and me, that's love. That's what we experience as love. There's no separation. It's a beautiful thing.
So really what you're saying is recognizing everything as awareness is a major piece in the disentanglement. Right?
Yes. But the first step is recognizing that you are awareness.
Yeah.
Don't worry about everything as awareness. Find it in your own experience, in yourself, that's who you are. You're not the thought. You're not the emotion. You're not your body. You're not the world. You're just what's aware, and you're the knowing of that. And once you actually get enough of that and you start to investigate it, it's like, well, yeah, I am that. I know that my body has a limit. I can feel, I can see it, I can touch it, right? I know that my body has a limit. I know that my mind has a limit. My thoughts have a limit. They arise and pass. They're in time. But I can't find any limit to my awareness, to who I am. I can't find an edge. I can't find anything that isn't that. So then the staggering implication of that is that, well then, are these all overlapping infinite awarenesses? That's impossible, right? They're not infinite. So, like, how is my awareness not Satya's awareness? I know my mind is separate from Satya's. I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know what she's feeling, right? The minds and the bodies are separate. That's fine. But my being, I don't know what's the stuff that makes a wall, that it's separate. I can't find that in my own experience. So that realization, which happens gradually over and over, is the second part of this, where you come back and you realize everything. I am that. that expression that is, I am that. So the first is I am. And then the second is I am that. And it's not ego. It's not like some egotistical. But don't let your mind think that it's everything. That would be bad. If your mind right now is saying, nah, that's fine. It's not about, like, investigate it in your own experience. Are you thought or are you aware of thought? Make that a koan. Make that a question. Don't try to answer it in your mind. Don't try to answer it conceptually. Answer it in your own experience. Is thought aware? Can a thought be aware? Does that even make sense?
I think what I get confused about is, like, I can be aware, like, I don't feel my edges. I'm aware of awareness. I can be aware, like, everything is awareness. Like, I can feel that. But that doesn't seem to me to always correlate with then, like, a lessening of suffering. Like, for me, I get more hooked in the emotions than the thoughts. But, like, right now, there's still a lot of emotions, and I'm, like, I'm aware that I'm awareness, I'm aware that everything's awareness, but there's still, like, suffering in the emotions right now.
But are you aware that you are not those emotions?
Like, when I go in, like, I feel their emptiness. Like, on a visceral level. Like, I'm aware of their emptiness. But yet, somehow, it's still very, very intense.
Okay, so it's important to know the difference between pain and suffering.
Yeah. I feel both the pain and the resistance.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just, maybe as I'm saying this, there's maybe a lot more awareness, but there's probably still some places that aren't fully, like blockages, I don't know, or something. Like, there's a lot of places I'm like, that's empty, and then maybe there's some places where I'm not.
Right.
Feeling it's empty.
Well, that's your clue.
Yeah.
So if there's suffering, then that's direct evidence that there's some place in you that's hooked or identified or not freed of believing that that's you.
I think I don't know if I've been taught or just assumed that it was a very binary process of, like, once you're, like, in touch with the emptiness of things, you're, like, in touch with emptiness. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like still very gradual.
It's, you know what? For most people, it's gradual.
Okay.
And some of the people who get to write the books have these big,
Okay.
Nuclear, like, thermonuclear awakenings where it's like everything's blasted out and it's, like, very binary. And that makes for really much better books. Like, Sounds True wants to publish that one. Tammy doesn't want to publish the one where it took 20 years and happened so gradually that you gave up 10 times. But it's, for most people, it's gradual. And so then if there's suffering, it's just your clue. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that the process doesn't work. It just means, oh, that's where I'm hooked. That's where I'm hooked. And then you just open it. You just bring it like, okay, but here I am. And then here's this. And it might be, from the past, it might be from the present. You might find a belief operating, whatever it is.
Yeah. It often feels like if I'm, like I have to be gradual with it, because like otherwise I get overwhelmed by pain, and that would be like, debilitating in this world. I can't just take like a month to process the pain. So it almost feels like a function of capitalism that I have to be gradual about it. So I'm like, it's almost like I opened up a lot of pain today, but I'm almost like, that's as far as I can go in order to go to work tomorrow. Otherwise I'm out tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know if that's just relative mind and thoughts trying to come up with a story, but I'm curious. What do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah.
In my own experience, I don't feel that. So the amount of pain that's in the world, and the amount of pain that I've experienced in my life, 70 years, holy shit, like, how'd that happen? But I can't even relate. Okay, in this moment, in one level, that's infinite, right? There's no way that I could process that. But we don't need to do that. We only need to do one thing, and that's realize that we're not that. So it's not about like the quantity. It's about letting that experience in the moment point you to who you are. It's not about like the infinite quantity, like you have to figure out like how to have a bigger throughput so you can purify all the pain in the world and all the pain in yourself. That would be impossible. That's like not a good task to set out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then like the one question my mind has though is like I can feel all of these energetic blockages inside of me that feel like the suffering. They feel like the resistance. They feel like that. So then I'm like, wouldn't de-identifying like be like immediately just like all the blockages are gone, which feels very hard. Okay.
It doesn't. It just means that the suffering from the blockages is gone, and the identification with them, and that lets them work themselves out in a much freer way over time.
Okay.
But it doesn't magically make them, unless you have one of those thermonuclear things which you have no control over and has its own backwash that can be really disorienting, and like forget your job, your life, your relationships, and your all of that for some period of time until you assimilate it. Like don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But
okay, that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Is everybody following this? It's like the mind and the body have their own momentum, their own conditioning. And yes, things can get worked out, purified, healed, but it takes that. The mind and the body live in time. Awareness doesn't.
Whoa. Now I can be aware at any time.
Okay, that's true. You're always aware.
Right, so can I be aware in the 18th century?
No, because that's time. Eternity isn't time.
Okay.
Eternity is the absence of time. The eternal present. I hope everybody's having fun.
I have a question kind of similar to Lil, but like, how does, I can understand like I'm not my emotions and I'm not my pain, but then there's like attachment to things, which I know attachment could also mean just any kind of suffering, but like attachment to like conditions in your life. Like, how do you, I guess, deal with that?
Well, it's
I can't really say like I'm not those. Like I never thought I was those things. You know what I mean?
well, there's a certain degree of like taking care of the things that you need to take care of. That's all based on conditions. Like it wouldn't make any sense that you say, okay, well, I'm just going to give up food and shelter and just let myself die because none of this matters, because that's not who I am. I mean, right? I mean, does anybody want to sign up for that as a path? No. I mean, life is good. Life is cool. When life is good, it's good. And keeping it good, making it good for yourself and for others is absolutely a good thing, and that's all based on conditions. But there's also a limit to what you can get out of that, and that's the art here. Like creating good conditions for yourself and for the people around you without it turning into like having to have a 600-foot yacht and 20 airplanes and control of a minor Caribbean island before you think you can be happy. Like, like what's really necessary and appropriate to create the conditions so that you can have a good life and also share that with other people, share love, and grow into who you are. Conditions are important for that. But there's a limit to what you want to try to create for yourself. Like, we don't need to be fully in the rat race. But we don't need to become monastics either.
I guess like how do you kind of like see through that in the direct path? Like I guess I understand it from a mindfulness perspective more, but maybe not so much direct path.
Well, the non-duality basically says that what you do just needs to reflect your understanding that you share your being with everyone and everything. And if you act from that understanding, you'll be fine. Now, if you have really strong conditioning that causes you to not act from that understanding, even though you have that understanding, then there's a contradiction, and the pure non-dual understanding may not be enough. So then you have to do some work. Like if you have, like if you're living a contradiction, then you have to like be really honest with yourself. And it helps to have honest reflection back from other people about that too. And just say, well, is that really appropriate? Do you really need a jet plane? I'm not saying that's what you're about, but as an absurd example, right? Or do you really need to drink 3 bottles of wine with dinner every night? Like it's, you may, some really famous spiritual teachers became alcoholics because there was some part of their conditioning that just like overrode their understanding, and they deluded themselves and the people around them into believing that it was okay, and it wasn't. So sometimes the understanding or the realization isn't enough.
Yeah, I guess like one maybe example that I was just thinking about, like I have air conditioning, like central AC for the first time in my adult life as of 6 months ago, and like my partner and I just keep like talking about like how awesome it is to have central AC, and like I don't know, we're just like, could we like ever go back or whatever? And I was like, oh, that's like attachment, like my conditions could change and maybe I can't afford an apartment with AC anymore or whatever. And then yeah, I just like, I feel like from a like kind of like Buddhist or mindfulness perspective, I just come to this like, you know, I could lose everything I have, like my health will one day go, like that kind of stuff, but like I guess
but you don't want your AC to go.
But like, I guess it from like the direct, like I feel like I would always come at it with that like the mindfulness perspective.
So you just, all you do is you just look at it and you go, who is attached to having air conditioning? You know, it's not about whether you have air conditioning or not. You know, that, I mean, one way to say this is God doesn't care if you have air conditioning or not. God meaning infinite being, awareness. Not God, the guy in the sky with the gray beard. But the universe doesn't care if you have air conditioning or not. So you use it like, well, who is attached to air conditioning? There's nothing wrong with having air conditioning. I mean, some of the houses and some of the buildings in Boulder were not designed for what climate change is doing to our evening summer temperatures. And they don't have the kind of insulation and ventilation to be comfortable when it's 98 outside at night and 78 outside at midnight. I mean, it just doesn't work that well. So if you have the money to have air conditioning, you have air conditioning. I mean, is it screwing up the planet for everybody to have air conditioning? You better believe it is, right? But if you don't have air conditioning, what's that saving? You know, it's not like going to make an impact. That isn't the fight. But if you choose not to have it, that's fine too, or you choose to use it less. You know, keep your house at 75 instead of 67. But you can use any of your own attachments, your own thought processes, your own wants and dislikes, and just, oh, well, who wants that? It doesn't mean you shouldn't want it. But don't identify with that wanting. It's just a habit. But some of those habits keep us alive. Right? It's fine to say, you know, who's attached to what you eat for dinner, but somebody needs to make dinner, right? You, like, someone needs to put food on the table.
There's something to be said about awareness not having time, and you have AC, but you're worrying about a time when you won't. And so what would it look like to enjoy it while you have it, and trust that you know what to do if you don't?
Yeah.
I have the opposite situation. We got into a house without AC, and I'm so happy about it because I like the house hot, and so now we don't have to fight about what the AC is. We have a small boiler, which is nice.
to the question, who is frustrated or who is angry by this thing that happened, I tend to go into like psychotherapy mode, and then I'm like, well, it's this part of me because of my conditioning or my parental situation or whatever, and is this step when I do that to say, well, who's defined or who's conditioned by that?
No, don't.
Yeah,
The question is not answerable by the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So discount any answer by the mind. So what you're trying to do is find in your experience the who, not the thought about answering the question who. So it's an experiential question, like it's the finger pointing at the moon, right? Just find the moon, find I, who is, because the I that you find isn't involved in that, right? You can't find who is this or that. You can't. You can just find a thought process or an emotion, but that's not who. Who is aware of that, and who is aware of that isn't that. When I say, who. It just refers to no one.
My mind is trying to control that.
Yeah.
And it takes me down that path.
Yeah, your mind's trying to answer the question.
Yeah.
So you just discount that. Any of these questions, like you can ask, who am I? Or who's aware? The mind can't answer that. Unless the mind is who you are. So the mind trying to claim that, and then you have to see through that, like that's not a satisfying answer. Yeah, it's tricky, but it can be helpful because the mind is capable of grasping that it can't know over time. It can learn that. And that's helpful. It doesn't want to admit that. It's not a pleasant, like the mind wants to know. That's its job, wants answers. So to meet its limit is very uncomfortable. It's much easier to make up stories that aren't true, which is what human history looks like. People making up belief systems and stories and religions and theologies and myths because the mind doesn't like not knowing. But if you really don't let it make stuff up, it'll eventually it'll just hit that wall over and over, and it's good for it. It's good. It's a good thing to do that process rather than just ignoring it. It's like the mind is just it just does this thing where it's like, I don't know anything, in that moment. That's insight. That's valuable. But don't let it make stuff up. Okay, well, thanks for playing. So I think, Brian, you know how the room goes back together, right? Okay, good.
Gotta pay attention.
Good, thank you. So Brian will be in charge of making sure it goes back together. Thank you all for participating, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.